There are actually no hardware franchises. So when I got started approximately 8 or 9 years ago, I realized that I had to figure out what the options were if I wanted to be in the hardware industry, which at the time came out of the need of the local community. So I lived in Logan Circle. There were not a lot of businesses in Logan Circle. Those of us that lived there wished there were more businesses. There was a lot of fierce local loyalty in that neighborhood, and I wanted to play into that. I also lived in a condo that needed a lot of renovating, which a lot of my neighbors were also in the same boat, and we just felt like there should be a local hardware store business, so I decided that I should open a hardware store. Probably easier said than done, but it just so happens that most of the national hardware stores that you'll think of belong to some type of buying group, and those buying groups are co-ops. And I'd asked the ACE General Counsel if she could give me a definition, the legal definition, an understandable one of a co-op, now that we've been given the definitions of franchises. And there was one sentence that I think stuck out that really differentiates a co-op from a franchise. The cooperative must return its earnings only to its owners and only in proportion to each owner's relative level of patronage based on the business within the cooperative. So if that makes any sense at all, rather than paying royalties to ACE for what we sell, they actually pay us a dividend for what we buy. So their sole purpose really initially was to be a wholesaler. And what's grown over the last approximately 85 years that ACE has been in business is a much more well-rounded franchise-like organization with the support that we're offered, the programs that we're given, the financing available, et cetera. But then on the flip side, they still have to pay us at the end of the year. So it ends up being a pretty neat deal all around. We get that payment at the end of the year in a balance of stock and cash. The nice thing about the cash is you can use it to do whatever you want with, open new stores, pay your taxes, give yourself a bonus. The stock portion, however, you do not get until you either sell the business, close the business, or die. So I did want to just talk a little bit about the similarities to a franchise, because we don't typically refer to ourselves as that. But I do own 7 stores with my husband, 4 in Washington, D.C., 2 in Baltimore, Maryland, and 1 in Tacoma Park, Maryland. We are very, very loyal to the urban market. Any of you who have been around D.C. for a while know that decades ago a lot of the businesses left when the residents were leaving, and there was just this lack of services and business community in the District of Columbia. And living here, not wanting to travel to the suburbs, not wanting to drive, I really bought into wanting to focus on the urban markets. We've opened approximately 1 a year for the last 7 years. Our sizes are between 5,500 square feet and 8,000 square feet in retail space. As you know, probably know, retail space in the district is extremely expensive. We pay on average twice what our national peers do for the hardware stores that they operate in other parts of the country, and so we have to be really, really smart franchisees or members of the co-op in order to make it work with the economics here in the district. Best practices, I think this has been mentioned particularly with Subway. You want to join a group that has had best practices tested and retested. We wanted to make sure that even though it wasn't a franchise relationship, that we were going to be given a set of guidelines. This is how you want to operate your business. This is how you want to start. We do have a national branding budget. I did say we don't pay royalties, but we do pay a small fee based on our sales to ACE every year for the national advertising campaign. Unfortunately, because it is so small, you probably don't see lots and lots of ACE advertisements on television like you would Home Depot or Lowe's or maybe some of the national franchises, because it is small. It is nice for our smaller retailers, the ones that don't do as much in revenue. It's capped based on the revenue that they do. They're not paying into this large system that's not helping them. And then it gives us national brand recognition. Going back to given the guidelines, being given the guidelines that a franchise will give you, we've been given a lot of freedom. So there is this framework for implementation, but there's also a very strong local component. So if you came to visit any one of my stores, they all look very different. They all have different sizes. They're all named after the neighborhoods that they are in, as opposed to being named after the national franchise. So there is some flexibility there, which has worked to our advantage in a couple ways. The example that I was telling someone earlier, Logan Circle was very anti-franchise or anti-national name when we first opened. I don't think it's that way now. I don't think it should be that way, but that's the way it was then. So in order to make sure that we really played into the needs and wants of the neighborhood, we did not put the name ACE on the front of our building. Ace at the time actually did not have in their franchise documentation a requirement to use the Ace name. They do now, but ironically, up until 8 years ago, they didn't. And so we didn't use it. We didn't have to. We didn't want to. We put Logan Hardware on the front of the building. People in Logan Circle now say, I'm going to Logan, meaning I'm going to the hardware store in Logan Circle, which is pretty cool. People also will come in and say, I went to the Ace on Capitol Hill, which is not an Ace. Can you tell me if you can help me with this product that I saw there? Because now it seems in the district, a lot of people identify all hardware stores with the Ace brand. So there are a lot of things that they helped us with, which is typical in franchising, setup and budgeting. When we opened that first store, it took about 3 months. I mean, in hindsight, it's really pretty hilarious what we went through. But Ace was afraid of an urban market. I picked a location that was 20 feet wide, 100 feet deep, 0 parking, 3 levels, no elevator. The chain's on the 2nd floor. Buckets of chain weigh about 100 pounds. I mean, we did everything we could to make them crazy. That first location took about 2 to 3 months once the build out was done to set up. We were trying to cut corners. We really didn't know what we were doing. There were a lot of setup processes that weren't in place yet that Ace and my husband and I have gotten a lot smarter about in the last 8 years. So the last store, which we opened last July, took approximately 4 weeks. We probably could have even cut that down to a shorter amount of time, but we wanted, just for training purposes, to keep it at 4 weeks. So what that means actually is that we get to start operating in our neighborhoods much faster, so the revenue starts coming in much faster, which has been really beneficial for us. The neighborhood starts to get excited. It's been the cool part about being in this business is how the neighborhoods have rallied around having their own local hardware store, and so we get to open and start doing business a lot faster. We do have merchandising help, what to carry and where to put it. There's about a core group of products that Ace has determined, about 6,000 square feet, that every good hardware store has to have. So even though we could theoretically go into a space smaller than 6,000 square feet, they will say optimal size is between 6,000 and 9,000 square feet, and that 6,000 square feet of core products really are non-negotiable. So those products come into my store. We are given what's called branching out money, so it's money to expand. There are no assigned territories, but if we decide we want to open a new location in a territory where we already are, in the District of Columbia, for example, there is a fund that gives us money for 3 years, basically, to help with operating capital if it's needed, cash flow if it's needed. That's also helped us with buying inventory, opening new locations, et cetera, and made them less expensive. But anyway, back to the 6,000 square feet. We would not necessarily be given that money if we didn't have that core of 6,000 square feet. So it gives us the rights to national brands. We carry brands like Benjamin Moore. Craftsman has recently done a deal. Sears has recently done a deal to sell Craftsman in Ace hardware stores to make sure that that brand continues to live. Vendors like GE, Black & Decker, all have deals with Ace to give us the buying power that we need. So I always tell my new employees, if I went to Black & Decker as little old Gina Schaefer and I wanted to buy drills, they would probably charge me 4 times what they would charge Home Depot. I go to Black & Decker as an Ace hardware store owner. I get a much better deal. It goes into the Ace distribution service center, and then I pull from there as I need it, so I get better pricing. That's the biggest benefit, truly, from having those buying agreements with Ace. The vendor relationships being pre-established, all of our billing is done back end. It's fairly seamless. It comes in once a month as a single bill. Ongoing training and support. I think any good franchise needs to offer this. If I were evaluating a franchise that didn't have ongoing training and support, I would be very afraid. We have an Owner's Institute when we get started. A lot of the training in the store is the responsibility of my staff, but there is a large training program established by Ace that travels around the country. We could go to Oak Brook where the Ace headquarters are. There's online training materials, et cetera. There's no guarantee for success. It really comes down to the operator and what you do with the framework you're given, however structured or unstructured that framework is. I happen to like the fact that there's a little bit of unstructured nature to being a member of the co-op. I do rely on them to give me industry trends, demographic data, product information, access to the vendors, a whole myriad of things that I wouldn't necessarily get if I was just this isolated bubble called a hardware store owner in the middle of a city. But it really does come down to what we do with the information they give us and how we execute it.